I always assumed if my marriage ended, it would be with a bang or tears in a lawyer's office, not a crumpled note forgotten in Derek's trousers. That scribbled address led me to a rental mansion outside Boston on a Saturday night, where I expected to catch a cheap affair. But when those heavy oak doors opened, I realized he was not betraying me with another woman. He was betraying my very existence to a high society he was desperate to enter. My name is Sloan, and at 36 years old, I have spent the last decade assessing catastrophe for Atherton Global. My job is to look at a perfectly stable corporate merger and find the microscopic fracture that will eventually bring the whole structure down. I live my life by probabilities, data sets, and evidence. Yet, the biggest risk factor in my life was currently downstairs, claiming he was at an overnight strategy meeting, while I was upstairs holding the smoking gun found in the back pocket of his slate gray trousers. I smoothed out the crumpled receipt paper on the laundry room counter. The handwriting was rushed, frantic even, but unmistakably his. It read, "Sat 10 p.m., don't tell her." Below it was an address in Chestnut Hill. Derek was a man defined by ambition that far outstripped his competence. For 7 years, I had watched him cycle through failed startups, from an organic dog food app to a blockchain logistics company that never logged a single block. But recently, the dynamic had shifted. He had cash stacks of hundreds in his wallet, and he claimed he was finally in deep talks with angel investors who valued his vision. I looked at the note again. The address was not a cheap motel or a dive bar, which were the standard venues for infidelity. It was prime real estate. I pulled out my laptop and logged into our shared cloud account. The GPS on his Audi was disabled. It was a clumsy move that screamed guilt. He forgot that while he could turn off a location tracker, he could not erase the digital footprint of the state infrastructure. I accessed our Easy Pass account. There it was. A toll charge at the Alston-Brighton Toll Plaza, heading west toward the suburbs just 40 minutes ago. "Okay, Derek," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's see what she looks like." I did not cry. Crying obscures vision and ruins focus. Instead, I calculated the variables. The probability of an affair was roughly 90%. I went to my closet and dressed for a funeral, or a burglary. Black turtleneck, black slacks, soft-soled boots. I checked my phone storage to ensure I had enough space for high-definition video recording. If I was going to divorce him, I would need leverage to protect my assets. I drove to Chestnut Hill with the radio off. The silence helped me sharpen my anger into a weapon. When the GPS announced I had arrived, I frowned. This was not a clandestine meeting spot. It was a gated estate, a sprawling mansion set back from the road, illuminated by floodlights that made the white stone glow against the night sky. A valet stand was set up out front, flanking a driveway filled with Bentleys, Mercedes, and at least 2 McLarens. I parked my modest sedan a block away and walked up the cobblestone path. The air smelled of expensive perfume and wood smoke. This was a gala, not a tryst. A security guard with a headset stepped in my path as I approached the massive oak double doors. "Ticket or invitation, ma'am?" he asked, his eyes scanning my attire with skepticism. I straightened my spine, channeling every ounce of corporate authority I possessed. I looked him dead in the eye and lied with the ease of a sociopath. "I am with the Sterling Investment Group," I said, my voice bored and clipped. My boss left his insulin kit in the car, and I had to retrieve it. "Do not make me call him out here, or you will be explaining to the host why their primary donor is having a medical episode on the front lawn." The guard hesitated, his confidence cracking under the weight of my fabricated scenario. He stepped aside. "Go ahead. Sorry for the trouble." I slipped inside. The foyer was cavernous, dripping with crystal chandeliers and filled with the hum of string quartets and polite laughter. Waiters circulated with silver trays of champagne. I kept my head down, moving toward the edge of the room, scanning the crowd for Derek's cheap suit. Then I saw it. At the far end of the ballroom, flanking a small stage, was a massive poster stand. It was a high-resolution portrait of my husband. He looked dignified, airbrushed, and powerful a version of him I had never seen in real life. But it was the text beneath his face that made the floor drop out from under me. It did not say Derek Miller. The bold, gold lettering read, Derek Vance, founder of the New Horizon charity. I froze, a glass of champagne trembling in the hand of a passing waiter as I bumped into him. I stared at the face of the man I slept next to every night, realizing that the infidelity I had come to expose was not against me, but against reality itself. "Excuse me," a woman in a silk gown said as she brushed past me. "Isn't he inspiring such a tragic story?" I gripped the velvet curtain next to me, my knuckles white. "Yes," I murmured, my voice barely audible. Tragic. The ballroom was a kaleidoscope of diamonds and malice. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting fractured light over a crowd that smelled of old money and aggressive networking. I pressed my back against a massive marble pillar, my breath catching in my throat as I took in the surreal juxtaposition. Surrounded by women in gowns that cost more than my first car and men wearing watches worth a down payment on a house, there was Derek. He was wearing the charcoal suit I had bought him off the rack at a department store sale last year for $200. I remembered ironing the hem of those trousers myself because the tailor charge was too high. Yet here, under the soft focus of the amber lighting, the cheap fabric did not look pathetic. It looked like humility. It looked like the modest attire of a saint who had given everything to a higher cause. I watched him move through the room. He was holding court near the open bar, one hand in his pocket, the other gesturing with a fluid, charismatic grace I had never witnessed in our living room. At home. Derek was a man who slumped on the sofa, defeated by the rejection emails in his inbox. Here, he was electric. Two women with surgically tightened faces drifted near my hiding spot, swirling their martinis. "It breaks my heart," one of them whispered, leaning in close to her friend. "Derek is so strong. Most men would have institutionalized her and moved on, but he visits her every single day. I heard she attacked him with a kitchen knife before the final psychotic break," the other woman replied with a shudder. "Can you imagine living with that kind of terror?" My blood turned to ice. I felt a strange, detached sensation, as if my spirit were floating up toward the ceiling, looking down at this woman named Sloane who was apparently a knife-wielding maniac. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. A hush fell over the room as a spotlight cut through the darkness, centering on the small stage. Derek stepped into the light. He looked down at his feet for a moment, letting the silence stretch, building the tension like a master conductor. When he looked up, his eyes were glistening. "Thank you all for being here," Derek said, his voice cracking perfectly on the last word. "It means the world to me, and it would have meant the world to Sloane." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "5 years ago, I married the love of my life," he continued, gripping the microphone stand as if it were the only thing holding him upright. "But the woman I married is gone. Schizophrenia is a thief. It didn't just take her mind. It took her soul. It took the gentle, brilliant woman I loved and replaced her with someone violent, someone scared, someone who screams at shadows and doesn't even know my name anymore." I stood frozen in the shadows, my nails digging into the velvet of the curtain behind me. I was not violent. I was the one who paid the mortgage. I was the one who managed his credit card debt. I was the one who made sure he took his cholesterol medication. "She is currently in a vegetative state at the St. Jude Psychiatric Facility," Derek lied, a tear actually rolling down his cheek. "The doctors say there is no coming back." But I refuse to give up. That is why I started the New Horizon charity. We need to fund the research that saves the next Sloane. We need to raise $2 million tonight to launch our new treatment wing. The room erupted in sympathetic murmurs. Checkbooks were already appearing on tables. To help explain the severity of her condition, Derek said, gesturing to the wings, I would like to invite Dr. Zara, Sloane's primary care physician, to the stage. A young woman walked out. She could not have been older than 25, wearing a white lab coat over a cocktail dress and glasses that were clearly non-prescription props. She looked like a casting director's idea of a hot doctor. Thank you, Derek, the woman said, her voice smooth and practiced. As Derek mentioned, Sloane's condition is tragic. The degeneration of her frontal lobe is rapid. Without the specialized care that Derek pays for out of pocket, she would have died months ago. His devotion is the only thing keeping her heart beating. I felt the urge to scream. It rose in my chest, a primal roar of denial. I wanted to run into that light, grab the microphone, and shout that I was right here, that I was sane, that I had just done laundry this morning. But then, my training kicked in. Risk assessment. If I ran out there now, screaming and red-faced, in my black clothes, interrupting a charity gala, what would I look like? I would look exactly like the paranoid, violent, unstable woman Derek had just described. I would validate his lie in front of 200 witnesses. He had not just created a scam, he had built a trap. He had weaponized my own identity against me. A cold clarity washed over me, suppressing the panic. This was not just about stealing money from rich people. This was a preemptive strike. He was painting me as legally incompetent so he could take control of everything I owned. I stepped back, deeper into the darkness of the heavy drapes. I turned and walked silently toward the service exit, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I was not going to give him the scene he wanted. I was going to give him a war he did not know was coming. I escaped the estate like a thief, blending into the catering staff exiting through the side kitchen door. My hands shook so violently that it took me 3 tries to insert the key into the ignition of my car. I drove home in silence, the radio off, my mind replaying the image of my husband on that stage. He had cried. He had wept for a wife who did not exist so he could rob people who had too much money. But as the adrenaline faded, a colder, sharper fear took its place. If Derek was selling the world a story that I was a vegetable, what was he planning to do with the healthy, walking, talking version of me waiting at home? He has to make it true. I whispered to the dashboard. He has to make me disappear. I pulled into our driveway at midnight. The house was dark. I bypassed the bedroom and went straight to Derek's home office. The door was locked, as it always was. He claimed it was because of client confidentiality, but now I knew better. I went to the kitchen junk drawer and retrieved a heavy-duty paperclip. Years ago, during an internal investigation into embezzlement at a satellite branch, a security consultant had taught me how to bypass simple interior tumblers. It was a party trick then. It was a survival skill now. I straightened the wire, inserted it into the pinhole, and applied tension. After 10 seconds of fumbling, I felt the cylinder yield. The room smelled of stale coffee and desperation. I woke his desktop computer. He had not changed his password since College Patriots '01. The screen flickered to life, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I did not have to dig deep. On the desktop, there was a folder simply labeled The Project. I opened it, expecting business plans. Instead, I found my own obituary. There were PDFs of medical records, flawlessly forged on letterhead from St. Jude's Psychiatric Facility. They detailed a history of violent outbursts, paranoid delusions, and a progressive cognitive decline starting 18 months ago. Next to them was a power of attorney document, drafted and ready, granting Derek full control over my finances and medical decisions. The signature line was blank, waiting for a forgery I knew he practiced while I slept. "You sick son of a bitch!" I hissed, my voice trembling. I clicked on his browser history. It was a roadmap of premeditated psychological warfare, how to induce mild hallucinations with household chemicals, symptoms of heavy metal poisoning versus schizophrenia. interaction between scopolamine and antidepressants, gaslighting techniques for spouses. He was not just lying to the public. He was researching how to break my mind so that when he finally committed me, I would actually look crazy. I minimized the browser and opened his email client. There was a thread with a user named StarletZara88. I am nervous about the gala. She had written 2 days ago. What if someone recognizes me from that toothpaste commercial? Just wear the glasses and keep the lab coat on. Derek had replied, You are not an actress tonight. Zara, you are a specialist. Stick to the script and I will wipe your credit card debt by Friday. I need this. Zara, I am drowning here. I dug further into his financial tab. It was worse than I thought. Our joint savings were intact, but his personal accounts were a graveyard. He had leveraged everything he could touch on obscure cryptocurrencies that had crashed 6 months ago. There were threatening emails from a loan shark using a Proton mail address, referencing a debt of $300,000. TikTok. Derek. One email read, Vinny is losing patience. The charity was not a passion project. It was a frantic attempt to pay off a kill fee, and I was the collateral damage. He needed the charity money to pay the sharks, but he needed the power of attorney to access the inheritance my grandmother had left me money that was in a trust he could not touch unless I was incapacitated. I sat back in his leather chair, the room spinning. I wasn't dealing with a cheater. I was living with a man who was actively plotting to erase my consciousness to save his own skin. Suddenly, the computer chimed. A message synced from his phone appeared in the corner of the screen. It was from a number I did not recognize, likely the burner phone he used for his business. Phase 2 starts Monday. The message read, Make sure she takes her vitamins, double the dose if she seems lucid. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. Every morning for the past month, Derek had been bringing me a glass of orange juice and a multivitamin in bed, kissing my forehead and telling me I looked tired. Oh my God! I choked out, a wave of nausea rolling over me. I have been taking them. I have been taking them every day. I covered my mouth, realizing the lethargy and headaches I had felt all week were not stress. They were the beginning of the end. He was poisoning me. And Monday was tomorrow. I wiped the cold sweat from my forehead, not because I was terrified, but because I needed to think. Calling the police was the logical first step for a civilian, but I was not a civilian. I was a liability manager. If I called the police now, Derek would show them the forged medical records. He would look at the officers with those sad puppy dog eyes and say, Officer, my wife has been off her meds. She is paranoid. And they would believe him. I would be sedated and strapped to a gurney before the sun came up. No, I needed undeniable proof. I went out to my car and popped the trunk. Hidden under the spare tire was my work go bag, a kit I used for site inspections that included high-definition micro cameras. I moved through the house with surgical precision. I planted one camera inside the hollowed-out sensor of the smoke detector in the kitchen, giving me a bird's-eye view of the stove and island. I placed a second one behind the mesh of the Bluetooth speaker on my nightstand, angling it directly at the bed. By 7 o'clock on Sunday morning, I was back in bed, feigning sleep. The front door creaked open. Heavy footsteps moved up the stairs. Derek entered the room, smelling of expensive cologne and fatigue. He sat on the edge of the bed and stroked my hair. Hey, sleepyhead, he whispered, his voice dripping with faux concern. I didn't want to wake you, but you need your routine. He reached for the glass of water and the small orange pill sitting on the nightstand. I had not noticed him place them there. Here, he said, helping me sit up. Take your vitamin. You have been looking so pale lately. I took the pill. It felt heavy in my palm, a tiny compressed bullet aimed at my brain. I put it in my mouth, took a large gulp of water, and made a show of swallowing hard. In reality, I tucked the pill between my gum and cheek, a trick I had learned from a documentary on prison life. Thanks, Derek, I murmured, letting my eyelids flutter. I feel I feel so heavy. That is just the exhaustion, he said, kissing my forehead. Go back to sleep. I will handle everything today. As soon as he left the room to shower, I spat the pill into a tissue and hid it inside my hollow curtain rod. I would need to get that to a lab, but first I had to secure my team. 2 hours later, I told Derek I was going for a walk to clear my foggy head. He hesitated but agreed, likely thinking the drugs were already working. I drove to a grimy coffee shop in South Boston 20 minutes away, where I knew he would never set foot. Waiting in the back booth were Marcus, a shark of a divorce attorney I had known since law school, and Ben, the head of IT security at my firm. I slid the folder across the sticky table. This isn't a consultation, I said, keeping my voice low. This is a war room. Marcus flipped through the forged medical records, his face hardening. Sloan, this is criminal fraud, attempted grievous bodily harm. We can have him arrested today. No, I said sharply. Arrest is too good for him. If we arrest him now, he becomes a victim of a misunderstanding. He gets bail. He spins the story. I want him destroyed. I want him to lose the one thing he values more than money. His reputation, Ben guessed, tapping away on his laptop. Exactly, I replied. I want him to hang himself with his own rope in front of the very people he is trying to impress. Ben turned his screen toward me. Well, you are in luck. I just cracked into his digital calendar. He is not just attending a party this week. He is hosting one Wednesday night. The Grand Ballroom at the Liberty Hotel. It is the official launch of the New Horizon charity. There is going to be a live auction. I looked at the screen. The event was titled A Night for Sloan. He is naming the gala after me, I said, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. He is going to stand on that stage and sell my tragedy to the highest bidder. What is the plan? Marcus asked, closing the folder. I leaned in, my eyes locking with theirs. I am going to let him think he has won, I said. I am going to be the perfect, sick, compliant wife until Wednesday. And then, I am going to crash his party. That is risky. Sloan, Marcus warned. If he is drugging you, he might up the dosage. I know, I said, clenching my fists under the table. But I have to know he is finished. Completely. I need you to prep the legal filings, and Ben. I need you to clone his phone. Can you do that? Consider it done. Ben said. I drove home. My heart rate steady for the first time in 24 hours. Derek wanted a show I would give him a finale he would never forget. Monday and Tuesday dragged on like a slow suffocation. The air in our house was thick with the humidity of unsaid things and the performance of a lifetime. Derek was relentless. He hovered over me with a suffocating tenderness, constantly planting seeds of doubt in my mind about my own history. Sloan, honey, why did you leave the back door wide open again? He asked on Tuesday morning, his voice laced with a pitying patience. The neighbors called. They said you were standing in the yard, screaming at a squirrel. I didn't, I stammered, looking down at my oatmeal. I was in bed all night. You don't remember. He sighed, stroking my hand. It is getting worse, isn't it? I forced a tear to my eye. I am scared, Derek. I know, he soothed. I will take care of everything. As soon as he left for his office, I pulled up the feed from the kitchen camera on my tablet. I watched the recording from 20 minutes prior. Derek stood at the counter, grinding a blue pill into a fine powder with the back of a spoon before stirring it into my oatmeal. Later, another clip showed him in the bathroom, staring at himself in the mirror. He was practicing his sad face, tilting his head to the side. She is gone. He rehearsed to his reflection, adjusting his tie. My wife she is just a shell now. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my friend at the toxicology lab. The message was short and chilling. Sample contains high doses of haloperidol and sedatives. Long-term use causes lethargy, confusion, and motor control loss. Get out of there. Sloan. I did not get out. Instead, I opened my laptop. Thanks to Ben, I had access to the email account Derek had been using to communicate with Zara. I composed a message to her personal address, routed through an anonymous server so it couldn't be traced back to me. Subject: be careful. Body: they know about the fake medical license. The police are watching the gala. I hit send. 10 minutes later, I heard Derek's phone ring in the hallway. He answered it, his voice hushed but frantic. Calm down. Zara, he hissed. Who told you that no one knows it is a bluff? Listen to me. Do not back out now or I will ruin you. He hung up and stormed into the living room, his face pale. The stress was getting to him. He needed to lock down his exit strategy immediately. He tossed a stack of documents onto the coffee table. Sloan, we need to handle some paperwork, he said, his breathing shallow. Since you have been having these episodes, I need to make sure the bills get paid. This just gives me authority to talk to the bank for you. I looked at the papers. It was a transfer of deeds and a total liquidation authorization for my investment trust. I don't know, Derek, I said, making my hand tremble as I reached for the pen. My father always said I should read everything. Your father is dead, Sloan, he snapped, then caught himself. I am sorry. I am so worried about you. Please, trust me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own pen. It looked like a standard blue ballpoint, but it was a specialized tool I had confiscated from a check-washing scam artist years ago. The ink was formulated to vanish completely upon contact with air after 48 hours. Okay, I whispered. For us. I signed my name, deliberately missing the loop on the S and slanting the letters to the left, the opposite of my banking signature. Even if the ink didn't fade, the signature would be flagged as a forgery by any competent forensic accountant. Derek snatched the papers the moment the ink touched the page. He looked at them with a hunger that made my stomach turn. Thank you, honey, he said, standing up abruptly. I have to go file these. You rest. He walked out to the patio. I switched the audio feed on my tablet to the external camera. He was dialing a number. Vinny, it is done, Derek said into the phone, his voice arrogant and loud. The cash cow has signed. I will have access to the trust funds by Thursday morning. You will get your money. Yeah, she is clueless. I have her eating out of my hand. He laughed, a sound that grated against my soul. I closed the tablet. I walked to my closet and pushed aside the gray and black suits I wore to blend into the corporate background. In the back, covered in plastic, was a dress I had bought in Paris 5 years ago and never worn. It was floor-length silk, red as fresh arterial blood, with a neckline that demanded attention. Thursday is too late. Derek, I said to the empty room. By Thursday, you won't even be able to afford a bus ticket. By 4 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon, the house was quiet. I lay curled on the sofa, clutching a throw pillow, making sure my breathing was shallow and uneven. Derek stood over me, adjusting his cufflinks. He looked impeccable in a midnight blue tuxedo, the very image of a grieving husband bravely facing the world. I have to go. Sloan, he said, his voice soft. Try to sleep. I will be late. Okay, I whispered, letting my eyes drift shut. Have fun. He chuckled darkly. It is not a party. Sloan, it is work. I am doing this for you. The moment the front door clicked shut and the tumblers locked, I threw off the blanket. The lethargy vanished. I marched to the bathroom and washed the feigned exhaustion from my face. I applied a layer of foundation, sharp eyeliner, and the crimson lipstick that matched the dress hanging in the closet. I did not look like a victim. I looked like an executioner. I picked up my burner phone and dialed 3 numbers in rapid succession. First, Marcus, my lawyer. Second, Detective Miller, a contact in the Economic Crimes Unit I had helped with a fraud case 3 years ago. Third, Jessica Vance, no relation to Derek's fake name and investigative journalist who had been trying to expose charity scams for years. It is tonight. I told them. Be at the Liberty Hotel in 30 minutes. Do not make a scene until I give the signal. I drove to the city, parking 3 blocks away to avoid the valet line. The Liberty Hotel, a former jail turned luxury accommodation, was imposing against the skyline. I skirted the main entrance where paparazzi were already snapping photos of local socialites. Instead, I headed for the loading dock. I slipped the lanyard Ben had fabricated around my neck. It identified me as Elena Ross, event security consultant. I swiped the card at the employee entrance. The light turned green. Ben was a genius. I navigated the labyrinth of concrete corridors, smelling of industrial cleaner and roasting chicken, until I found the service elevator. I took it to the mezzanine level, bypassing the ballroom floor entirely. My target was the audio-visual control booth that overlooked the main hall. The door to the booth was propped open. Inside, a young technician with headphones was tapping away on a console. "Excuse me," I said, stepping inside and flashing my badge before he could focus. "We have a potential network intrusion targeting the donor database. I need to secure the presentation laptop immediately." The technician blinked, pulling off his headphones. "What no one told me about an audit. The show starts in 10 minutes. That is why I am here," I snapped, channeling my most authoritative boardroom voice. "Do you want to explain to the board why the credit card numbers of Boston's wealthiest citizens were stolen on your watch? Step aside." He scrambled out of the chair, his face pale. No, of course not. Go ahead." I sat down at the control desk. Derek's presentation file, New Horizon Launch Final, PPX, was queued up on the main screen. I inserted my flash drive. With a few quick keystrokes, I deleted his file and replaced it with mine, renaming it to match his exactly. "Oh, system clear," I said, standing up. "Do not touch the laptop. The encryption is updating." "Got it," he stammered. I walked out of the booth and found a shadowy spot on the mezzanine balcony, hidden by a heavy velvet drape. From here, I had a perfect view of the ballroom below. It was packed. Derek was on stage, bathed in a warm spotlight. Zara stood a few feet behind him, looking demure in her white coat, nodding solemnly. "My wife, Sloane, used to love music," Derek was saying into the microphone, his voice thick with emotion. "Now, the only sound she responds to is the beeping of machines. It tears me apart. But your generosity tonight gives me hope." I watched the crowd. Women were dabbing their eyes with handkerchiefs. Men were reaching for their checkbooks inside their tuxedo jackets. He had them. He had successfully sold my death while I was still breathing. The audacity of it made my blood boil. But my hands remained steady. I pulled out my phone and opened my text thread with Derek. I typed a single message. The vitamin tasted bitter. "Darling," I hit send. Then I looked down at the stage, waiting for the vibration in his pocket to shatter his world. I watched from the shadows of the mezzanine as Derek reached into his tuxedo pocket. He must have felt the vibration of the notification, a subtle buzz that signaled the beginning of his end. He pulled the phone out discreetly, keeping it below the podium, smiling at the crowd as he glanced at the screen. I saw the exact moment the blood drained from his face. His confident smile faltered, twitching into a grimace of pure confusion. He looked up, scanning the darkened room, his eyes darting frantically from the tables to the balcony, searching for a ghost. He cleared his throat, the sound amplified loudly over the speakers. I apologize," Derek stammered, shoving the phone back into his pocket with a trembling hand. "Just a technical issue with the donor list. Let us continue." He gestured to an easel covered by a velvet cloth. "Tonight, we have a very special item up for auction. Before my wife. Before Sloane lost her battle with reality, she found solace in painting. This was the last piece she created during her final moments of clarity. We call it Fading Light. He whipped the cloth off to reveal a generic abstract painting that I knew for a fact he had purchased at a garage sale 3 years ago for $15. "Do I hear a starting bid of 5,000? Derek asked, his voice regaining some of its oily charm. 10,000! A man in the front row shouted. 15,000! Another voice called out. I looked at the technician in the booth below me. He was staring at the screen, confused by the new file I had loaded, but he followed the cue I had programmed. The massive projection screen behind Derek, which had been displaying a slideshow of sad stock photos, suddenly flickered black. Then, the audio cut through the room. It was not the somber violin music Derek had selected. It was the sharp, metallic clatter of a spoon against a ceramic bowl. The image on the screen resolved into high-definition clarity. It was our kitchen, filmed from the ceiling angle. The timestamp in the corner read, Sunday, 7:15 a.m., on the screen. Derek stood at the kitchen island. He was whistling a cheerful tune as he took a blue pill from a bottle, crushed it between 2 spoons, and sprinkled the powder into my bowl of oatmeal. The room went silent. The only sound was the voice of the Derek on the screen, who picked up his phone and laughed. "Yeah, Vinny, do not worry," the digital Derek said, his voice echoing through the silent ballroom. "She just ate it. She is totally out of it. Another week of this cocktail and she will be signing over the rights to her own life. I will have your money." Derek turned around on stage, his eyes widening as he saw himself looming 10 feet tall behind him. "Cut the feed!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "Turn it off, we are being hacked. This is AI, it is a deep fake." But the video did not stop. It cut to a new scene. This one was from the bedroom camera. Derek was standing in front of the full-length mirror, adjusting his tie. He forced a frown onto his face, let his shoulders slump, and looked into the glass with practiced sorrow. "My wife, Sloane." The on-screen Derek recited, then shook his head. "No, that is too stiff. Try again. My beloved Sloane." He squeezed his eyes shut and forced a tear out. He opened his eyes and grinned at his reflection. "That is the one. That will get the old ladies crying." A collective gasp swept through the room like a physical wave. The wealthy donors who seconds ago had been reaching for their wallets were now staring at the stage with a mixture of horror and dawning fury. Derek was pacing back and forth, waving his hands. "Please listen to me. This is a malicious attack by my competitors. None of this is real." Then the third clip played. It showed Derek and Zara sitting at our dining table. He was handing her a thick envelope of cash. "You look the part, Zara," Derek said in the video. "Just keep the glasses on and use big medical words. If anyone asks for credentials, tell them it is a HIPAA violation to disclose them. We split the auction proceeds 60-40. I don't know, Derek." Zara's voice on the screen replied, "What if she wakes up?" "She won't," Derek sneered. "I am making sure of that." On stage, the real Zara let out a strangled cry. She looked at the screen, then at the angry faces in the crowd. She took a step back, knocking over a flower arrangement. "I didn't know," she shrieked into her lapel mic, which was unfortunately still on. "He told me it was a reality show pilot. I have to go." She turned and sprinted toward the wings, tripping over her high heels in her haste to escape the spotlight. The murmurs in the crowd escalated into a roar. A heavy crystal glass was thrown from a table, shattering near Derek's feet. "You scumbag," a donor yelled. "You fraud." Derek stood alone in the center of the stage, the projection of his own villainy playing on a loop behind him. He looked small, sweaty, and utterly trapped. He gripped the podium, his knuckles white, looking for an exit that did not exist. From my vantage point on the balcony, I took a sip of the warm bottled water I had brought with me. It tasted better than the finest champagne. The trap had snapped shut. Now, it was time to collect the catch. The house lights slammed on with a blinding intensity. washing out the shadows where Derek had been trying to hide. The sudden brightness drew a collective gasp from the crowd, stripping away the intimate, charitable atmosphere he had carefully cultivated and replacing it with the harsh reality of an interrogation room. I stepped out from the stage wings. The red silk dress flowed around me like liquid armor, a violent splash of color against the sterile white of the projection screen. I held my own microphone, which I had swiped from the audio booth, and walked to the center of the stage, my heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor. I stopped 5 feet from Derek. He looked at me as if he were seeing a resurrection. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice steady and amplified, cutting through the murmurs of the stunned audience. "My name is Sloane, and as you can see, I am fully awake. I am entirely non-violent, and most importantly, I did not take the vitamin my husband prepared for me tonight." Derek snapped out of his paralysis, his face twisted into a mask of feral panic. He lunged toward me, his hands reaching for the microphone. "Give me that," he screamed, his spittle flying. She is sick. Stop her." He never reached me. 2 massive security guards, hired by Marcus explicitly for this moment, stepped out from behind the curtain and intercepted him. They grabbed Derek by the arms, restraining him with professional ease. He thrashed against their grip, his tuxedo jacket bunching up around his neck. "She escaped from the facility," Derek shouted to the crowd, his eyes wild and desperate. "She is having a paranoid episode. Please, you have to believe me. She is dangerous." I did not flinch. I did not even look at him. I looked directly at the faces of the donors, the CEOs, the philanthropists, the socialites who were staring at us in horrific fascination. "Dangerous," I repeated calmly into the mic. "Let us see what the science says." I clicked the remote in my hand. The video of Derek's rehearsal vanished, replaced by a scanned document projected 10 feet tall behind me. It was a toxicology report from a certified independent laboratory, dated that morning. The red stamp of authenticity was clearly visible in the corner. "This is the analysis of my blood drawn 8 hours ago," I explained, pointing to the highlighted sections. "You will notice there are 0 markers for schizophrenia or any other organic mental illness. However, there are significant levels of haloperidol and benzodiazepines drugs used to sedate violent inmates, which were found in the vitamins my husband has been feeding me for the last week." The crowd erupted into hushed whispers. I saw faces turning pale. They were realizing they had almost applauded a man who was actively poisoning his wife. "It is a lie!" Derek shrieked, struggling so hard his feet left the ground. "She forged it. She is a risk assessor. She knows how to fake documents. She is trying to frame me because she is jealous of my success." I turned slowly to look at Zara. The fake doctor was huddled near the edge of the stage, looking for a way to jump down without breaking an ankle. She froze when my gaze landed on her. "Miss Zara," I said, my voice dropping to a colder, more dangerous register. "My lawyer is currently standing at the back of the room with the police. If you continue to participate in this charade, you will be charged as an accomplice to attempted murder and grand larceny. However, if you tell these people the truth right now, we might be able to discuss a plea deal for simple fraud." Zara looked at the police officers entering the back of the ballroom. She looked at Derek, who was sweating and raving. Then she looked at me. The survival instinct in her eyes won out. She burst into tears, her composure shattering instantly. "He hired me," she wailed, pointing a shaking finger at Derek. "I am not a doctor, I am an actress. He found me on a casting website. He told me this was a pilot for a new reality show about overcoming marital struggles. He said the medical stuff was just a script." "You lying bitch," Derek roared, straining against the guards. "Shut up, you are ruining everything." "He paid me $5,000 in cash," Zara sobbed, pulling a thick envelope from her lab coat pocket and throwing it onto the stage floor. I didn't know he was actually hurting you. I swear I just needed the rent money. The room fell into a deadly silence. The truth hung in the air, undeniable and ugly. Derek's defense had not just crumbled, it had been pulverized. He stood there, panting, his hair disheveled, surrounded by the wreckage of his lies. He looked out at the audience, searching for a sympathetic face, but found only disgust and anger. The influential men and women of Boston were not looking at a tragic hero anymore. They were looking at a monster in a cheap suit. "Well, Derek," I said, stepping closer to him so he could see the fire in my eyes. "It looks like the show is over." The heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open with a resounding crash that silenced the remaining murmurs in the room. Detective Miller did not walk in. He marched, flanked by 4 uniformed officers who moved with the grim efficiency of a tactical team. The sea of tuxedos and ball gowns parted instantly, creating a wide corridor of shame leading directly to the stage where my husband was currently being held up by the armpits like a rag doll. "Derek Miller," the detective announced, his voice booming without the need for a microphone. "You are under arrest." Derek stopped struggling. He slumped, his eyes darting between the handcuffs on the officer's belt and the faces of the people he had spent the last year trying to impress. "On what grounds?" Derek spat, though his voice lacked any real conviction. This is a misunderstanding. For wire fraud, grand larceny, and attempted aggravated assault with a controlled substance," the detective recited, pulling Derek's wrists behind his back. The metal cuffs clicked shut with a sound that was sweeter to my ears than any symphony. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it." The spell over the room broke completely. The shock of the audience morphed instantly into outrage. These were not people who were used to being swindled. They were captains of industry, old money heirs, and ruthless venture capitalists. They surged forward, surrounding the stage like a pack of wolves that had realized their alpha was wounded. "I want my check back immediately," a woman in a sequined dress shouted, waving a piece of paper in the air. "I am calling the district attorney," a man roared from the second row. "You invited me here to steal from me. My reputation," another yelled. "I was photographed with you." Derek looked at them, his face crumbling. The mask of the charismatic philanthropist had dissolved, leaving behind only a desperate, greedy man. He turned his head to look at me. His eyes were red, filled with a toxic mix of hatred and self-pity. "You," he hissed, straining against the officer's grip. "You destroyed everything I was. This close, I did this for us. For our future, I was going to build an empire for us." I took a step closer, looking down at him from the moral high ground I had clawed my way back to. I felt absolutely nothing for him. No love, no pity, not even anger anymore. Just a cold, clinical detachment. "No, Derek," I said, my voice low but carrying clearly in the sudden hush near the stage. "You did not do this for us. You did this for you. You sold me my sanity, my health, my freedom just to buy a seat in this room. You wanted their validation more than you wanted your wife." I leaned in, ensuring he could see the absolute finality in my eyes. "And now," I whispered, "now you have lost both." "Get him out of here," Detective Miller ordered. The officers hauled Derek off the stage. As they dragged him down the aisle, the room turned into a frenzy of flashing lights. Every smartphone was out. Every influencer and socialite who had been live-streaming the gala was now broadcasting the arrest of the century. I could see the captions writing themselves in real-time: "Charity scammer arrested," "Husband poisons wife for clout," "The Great Boston Betrayal." By the time he reached the police cruiser, his face would be global news. I stood alone on the stage for a moment, letting the chaos swirl around me. Then, I raised the microphone one last time. "Attention, everyone," I said. The crowd quieted down, turning back to look at the woman in the red dress. The funds collected tonight have been frozen by the authorities. However, my legal team is on site. You may request a full refund immediately, or you may authorize us to transfer your donation to the Harbor House Shelter, a legitimate organization that actually helps women who are being abused in their own homes. The choice is yours." For a second, there was silence. Then, a man in the back started clapping. It was a slow, rhythmic applause. Then another joined in, then another. Within 10 seconds, the room was thunderous with applause. It was not polite golf claps, it was the applause of respect. They were not clapping for a victim, they were clapping for a survivor who had outsmarted the predator. I placed the microphone on the podium. I did not bow. I simply turned and walked down the stairs, head high, moving through the crowd that parted for me with reverence. Outside, the cool night air hit my face. The blue and red lights of the police cruisers painted the hotel walls in a chaotic strobe. Derek was being shoved into the back of a squad car, his head pushed down by an officer to avoid the doorframe. Marcus, my lawyer, was waiting by the curb. He looked at me and nodded, then walked over to the open door of the police car before they could slam it shut. He held out a thick manila envelope. "Mr. Miller," Marcus said, tossing the envelope onto Derek's lap. "One last thing." "What is this?" Derek snarled, his hands cuffed awkwardly behind him. "Divorce papers," Marcus replied with a shark-like grin. "You have been served. We are petitioning for full asset forfeiture to cover emotional damages. Have a good night." The officer slammed the door. I watched through the window as Derek screamed something silent and impotent against the glass. The car pulled away, disappearing into the city traffic, taking my past with it. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that finally tasted clean. I did not go home to weep into my pillow. I had work to do. As the police cruiser faded into the traffic of downtown Boston, Marcus and I hailed a cab and headed straight for the shared workspace where Derek rented his corporate headquarters. It was midnight, but the city lights were still burning. Using the very power of attorney documents, Derek had forced me to sign documents that gave me total control over his assets. I unlocked the glass doors. I did not knock. I beckoned the forensic accountants Marcus had on retainer to follow me inside. "Take everything," I told them, my voice echoing in the sterile hallway. "Hard drives, servers, physical files. I want every byte of data secured before his assistant wakes up tomorrow morning." I sat at his desk, the leather chair still molded to his shape. I logged into his private banking portal. There it was, the Black Fund. It was not investor money. It was my money. It was the $50,000 from our joint savings, the rainy day fund, the money for the house renovation we never started. He had siphoned it off, dollar by dollar, to hide it in a shell account in the Cayman Islands. "Gotcha," I whispered. With 3 clicks, I initiated a wire transfer, moving every single cent into a frozen escrow account controlled by my legal team. He would leave prison penniless. By 2 a.m, I was pulling into my driveway. The house stood silent, no longer a home, but a crime scene I had finished processing. I walked into the kitchen and climbed onto the counter. I pulled the smoke detector down and removed the tiny SD card. Then I went to the bedroom. These little chips of plastic were the final nails in his coffin. They held the footage of the poisoning, the practice sessions, the confession to Zara. "Enjoy your stay in state prison, Derek," I said, dropping the cards into my purse. I did not stop there. I went to the closet. I grabbed armfuls of his clothes, the Italian silk suits he had bought to impress donors, the cashmere sweaters, the shoes that cost more than my first car. I did not pack them in boxes. I dragged them down the stairs, my heels catching on the carpet, and threw them out the front door. I tossed them onto the wet grass of the front lawn, making a pile of his vanity right there under the streetlights. I called a 24-hour locksmith and a private security firm. While the locksmith drilled out the deadbolt that Derek had used his key on just hours ago, I went to the wine cellar. There was a bottle of vintage Cabernet sitting on the top shelf. Derek had bought it 6 months ago. "We will drink this when I make my first million," he had told me back then. I grabbed the corkscrew. I popped the cork with a satisfying sound and poured a glass to the brim. I did not cry. I did not collapse. The pain I had felt earlier had been cauterized by the heat of my anger. I sat in the armchair by the window. Outside, the heavy rumble of the early morning garbage truck approached. I watched through the glass as the sanitation workers stopped in front of our house. They looked at the pile of expensive clothes on the lawn, shrugged, and began scooping up the suits and ties, tossing them into the compactor like common trash. It was poetic. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the piece of paper that had started it all. The crumpled receipt sat 10 p.m. Don't tell her. I struck a match. I held the flame to the corner of the paper and watched the fire eat the words. I dropped it into the crystal ashtray and watched it turn to ash. The fire flared up for a second, hot and bright, and then died out completely, just like my 10-year marriage. I took a long sip of the wine. It tasted like victory. I was alone, but for the first time in a long time, I was safe. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please comment below and let me know where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts on Sloane's revenge. Don't forget to subscribe to the Lily Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach more people.